International trade. International trade is the exchange of capital, goods, and services across international borders or territories because there is a need or want of goods or services. In most countries, such trade represents a significant share of gross domestic product, GDP. While international trade has existed throughout history, for example Uttarapath, Silk Road, Amber Road, Scramble for Africa, Atlantic slave trade, and salt roads, its economic, social, and political importance has been on the rise in recent centuries. Carrying out trade at an international level is a complex process when compared to domestic trade. When trade takes place between two or more states, factors like currency, government policies, economy, judicial system, laws, and markets influence trade. To ease and justify the process of trade between countries of different economic standing in the modern era, some international economic organizations were formed, such as the World Trade Organization. These organizations work towards the facilitation and growth of international trade. Statistical services of intergovernmental and supranational organizations and governmental statistical agencies publish official statistics on international trade. Differences from domestic trade. Ports play an important role in facilitating international trade. The Port of New York and New Jersey grew from the original harbor at the convergence of the Hudson River and the East River at the upper New York Bay. International trade is, in principle, not different from domestic trade, as the motivation and the behavior of parties involved in a trade do not change fundamentally regardless of whether trade is across a border or not. However, in practical terms, carrying out trade at an international level is typically a more complex process than domestic trade. The main difference is that international trade is typically more costly than domestic trade.
This is due to the fact that cross-border trade typically incurs additional costs such as explicit tariffs as well as explicit or implicit non-tariff barriers such as time costs, due to border delays, language and cultural differences, product safety, the legal system, and so on. Another difference between domestic and international trade is that factors of production such as capital and labor are often more mobile within a country than across countries. Thus, international trade is mostly restricted to trade in goods and services, and only to a lesser extent to trade in capital, labor, or other factors of production. Trade in goods and services can serve as a substitute for trade in factors of production. Instead of importing a factor of production, a country can import goods that make intensive use of that factor of production and thus embody it. An example of this is the import of labor-intensive goods by the United States from China. Instead of importing Chinese labor, the United States imports goods that were produced with Chinese labor. One report in 2010 suggested that international trade was increased when a country hosted a network of immigrants, but the trade effect was weakened when the immigrants became assimilated into their new country. What is international trade? International trade is the exchange of goods and services across international borders. It usually comes with additional risks caused by changes in exchange rates, government policies, laws, judicial systems, and financial markets. Cross-border trade comprises import, export, entrepot, foreign direct investment, job outsourcing, setting up production in other countries, and setting up of multinational companies. Cross-border commerce increases the reach of local traders and producers. Manufacturers upgrade their products and services to suit global demands. International trade drives a country's growth. Import-export figures are one of the top contributors to a country's gross domestic product. Thus, every country tries to strengthen its global trade relationships with world leaders. In the 18th century, Adam Smith brought the international trade theory of comparative advantage analysis into the limelight. It was founded on the mercantilist thoughts of the British School of Classical Economics. In Wealth of Nations, The author instigated the need for specialized goods production amidst extensive demand and scarce supply of resources. Later, the classical economist David Ricardo proposed the principles of comparative advantage. Goods and services are imported goods due to the following reasons. 1. Low price. 2. Superior quality. 3. Lack of availability in the domestic market. 4. Excessive demand. 5. Low supply. Similarly, goods are exported due to the following reasons. 1. Higher value in the international market. 2. International quality. 3. Excess production in the domestic market. 4. Increasing demand in the global market. Often, companies set up their production units outside their geographical boundaries to avail cheap labor, natural resources unavailable domestically, and lower cost of production. International trade types. Cross-border trade can take place via 3 different routes. 1. Import, primarily, when the country is incapable of producing products domestically, goods are imported. 2. Export, when the country produces surplus goods or services of international quality, it can sell these outside its geographical boundaries. Such international selling of products is termed export trade. 3. Entrepot, it is a blend of import and export. Country A buys goods or services from country B, and sells them to country C, after adding some value to the goods. Example number 1. Let us assume that there are 2 countries, X and Y. X produce rice at a very low price, in comparison to Y. X is a developing nation. Y, on the other hand, cannot grow rice on its land despite having a flourishing economy, due to the unfavorable climate and soil. In such a scenario, international trade takes place between X and Y. To fulfill domestic demands, Y can buy as much as it needs from X. Likewise, by selling its excess yield to Y, X gains monetarily. Example number 2. In 2022, Europe started importing natural gases from Qatar instead of Russia. Before the war, Russia fulfilled almost 40% of Europe's natural gas requirements. Consequentially, Qatar has signed various long-term contracts with the U.S. natural gas imports.